As it was last year, the guiding principle that we ask you all to follow is try to do no harm to business. So that means in this time of recovery of the economy, try not to add to the regulatory burden and the tax burden that small businesses are already under. The first priority that we're going into 2014 with is to focus state government before asking for new revenue. This is similar to a 2013 priority as well. And we would ask that you look for opportunities to eliminate agency and program redundancies and reform regulatory and permitting systems wherever those opportunities exist. The second priority is workers' compensation reform. This has been a priority that has appeared on our list for several years now. The last couple of years, it seems like there has been some shift toward making progress, and we were encouraged by the action that the Senate took last year in terms of expanding the structured settlements program, and we would ask that those efforts continue this year. As our members look at potential rate increases, we want you to look for any ways possible to rein in the costs of this workers' comp system. Third, protect our resource industries. You all know how important the timber industry and shellfish are to our economy here in Mason County. Avoid any more in the way of regulatory and tax burden on these businesses especially. And then last, the Belfair bypass. In the context of a big transportation package, if it is indeed on your horizon, we hope that the bypass will not be forgotten. And we also hope that with any large package that would include new revenue, that there are also significant reforms that accompany that new revenue. And with that, I will ask the first question and also ask if any of you have questions to start handing them to Heidi. So to kick it off, if you could each give an example of something you did last session to help support small business, that would be great. A vote, a bill, or some other project you worked on. And I'll start with Representative MacEwen.
So I think a vote that was key. The House tried to increase the B&O taxes 270% last year. I voted against that, and it's important to me that we continue to try to do that and to run the state on the backs of small businesses, and I'll continue to fight against those types of tax increases. And in fact, I'm introducing a bill next week that will significantly reduce B&O taxes for everyone. And if you look at other states that have a streamlined tax system, they're growing. We're number 5 in the nation for business failures, and I think a part of that is because of our the way our B&O is structured, and you can end up paying taxes when you're losing money. So I'll be interested in that bill next week and continue to fight against efforts to increase the B&O tax.
Well, I guess my biggest accomplishment last year was that worked very closely with all members of the legislature, especially the 23 members of the Republican caucus, and we formed the Majority Coalition Caucus with 2 Democrats and 23 Republicans. The coalition held together throughout the session. We had one of our members, Mike Carroll, unfortunately passed away. Gave us only 24, but we came back with now with Jan Angel winning in the 26th district to have 26 members of our coalition caucus. And it's a bipartisan caucus. We defeated Inslee's proposal for $1.2 billion in new taxes. We held strong on many of the reforms that we wanted, and even the year before with the coalition we passed a bill which means we have a balanced budget after 4 years. So we passed our 2-year budget with no new taxes. Took a little time, but it passed 44-2 in the Senate. So I think that was a pretty well accepted budget. And this year, as you notice the press doesn't report on this, but we're going into the session next week without a deficit. So I think that coalition has worked pretty well.
Thank you. So I'm pretty focused on education, have been ever since I got elected and remained there. I think the biggest bill that I worked on last year for education funding, brings another $1 million into the education budget by allowing the timber industry to put trees in a place, sort them, and then sell them when they can get the best price for them, rather than being able to just, the trees are out there, cut them, and the money, whatever price you get. So it's a little bit more of a way for the state to be able to bring more money in by using a little different method. It was something we've done for 5 years, and so I had a bill that continued that process because it is very successful and does bring extra money into the state coffers. The other bill that I'm going to be sponsoring this year has to do with our timber industry dollars that go to the state. Are actually, they should be coming through local property taxes, should be coming to the school districts. And what what the state does is whatever money comes into us, they just reduce the amount of money that the state sends to us by that same amount. And I'm trying to get a bill that says, no, this is our asset that maybe we don't have in Seattle and we don't have in the big city. It's the trees. And I believe those dollars should come directly to our school districts and offset the cost of our local property taxes that we pay as individuals.
Thank you. I have a couple questions from the audience. One, what is your position on charging sales tax on internet sales? And what can we do at the state level to help us be able to charge the tax, if that's your position? And we'll start with Senator Sheldon.
Well, I think it's going to be a federal issue. I think it wouldn't make sense to states all have a different system, so we'll watch what the feds do. And there's been some talk about it passing, but just like any government, taxes are a tough thing to pass, but it may happen at the federal level to standardize it across.
And that's really where it has to happen because we're shipping all over the country, actually all over the world. I'll tell you one taxing issue that really hurts Washington State is the fact that Oregon doesn't charge a sales tax and we do. It's not as big an impact here, but those folks and businesses that are down in Clark County, it's a huge issue. Now I know Oregon is considering some sort of sales tax, but the difference in us not having an income tax and relying heavily on sales tax and Oregon being exactly the opposite hurts our state in a huge way. If there was anything I could do, would be to try to get us to find a way to not have such huge differences, and I think it would help Washington State significantly.
Yeah, the internet sales tax is a federal issue, the interstate commerce laws, so feds need to figure out what they want to do.
You recently had a special session to address some incentives for Boeing. What were your thoughts going into that special session, and will there be enough trickle down to give small businesses in our state some benefit, or do we need to do something this session, especially for small business? And I'll start with Representative MacEwen.
I served on the Boeing 777 task force to we started with that in late August, early September, and it was to address the entire issue with the 777X and ensuring that it stayed in Washington State, as well as the wing fabrication for it. And so I had a unique insight, I think, to a lot of that. There's 2,000 suppliers to Boeing, rounding it off, in every county except one. I always forget which county it is that doesn't have aerospace, but essentially it is in every county in the state. And in the 35th district, I believe there's 14 suppliers to Boeing. We have close to 1,000 workers that work for Boeing in this district. It is a big issue. It represents 11% of our state's gross domestic product, and if we let that go to another state, it would be devastating. For every Boeing job, there's 3 more jobs that are not in the aerospace industry. The people that they spend their money at, it supports 3 other jobs for every Boeing worker. So going into that special session, and we're having worked on that task force, it was comprised of Republicans and Democrats evenly from both the House and the Senate, the governor's office, members of the machinists union, the engineers union. The only people that were absent from that task force was Boeing management, and I think that was actually a good thing because it allowed some frank conversations, and we can't control what management's going to do, nor should we. but it allowed for some real genuine conversations that occurred there. So going into that special session, we did not create a new tax incentive. We extended what we already have. We made some tweaks to it. Those incentives were set to expire in 2020. We took them out to 2040. But contingent on that was that production does happen in Washington State. So if Boeing chose to leave, those incentives actually would go away regardless of what other planes they would be manufacturing here. I'm glad we passed that bill. It was the right thing to do. We also passed a bill related to the education side of this, because the wing fabrication, this 777X, has never been built before. So there's an entire new training system that needs to take place, and the state has partnered with the aerospace industry making that happen. I'm proud of the work that task force did. I'm very happy that the Machinists Union ratified the contract. We didn't have anything to do with that as the state, and again, nor should we. But had that vote not happened, I think we would be seriously looking at having played all our cards and might have lost Boeing. So those two things, the work we did at the state level, management and union coming together and getting their contract worked out, I think are all positives. And again, you look at the 2,000 suppliers, some of them are 1- and 2-person shops that are suppliers to Boeing. This did impact small business. It wasn't just about Boeing, it was about the entire supply chain. So I'm glad that we did it. The only thing I'd say is I don't think we should have had, in a broad sense, we shouldn't have had to go into special session. We should have a culture in this state that businesses want to naturally stay here, that they want to come here. And what I mean by that, we shouldn't have had to go and pass something. We should have already been in a situation that it was a non-issue. That companies like Boeing would say, well, we want to stay here, of course. So, I'm glad I took those votes to ensure that we kept Boeing, but we need to keep working on changing the business culture in this state so we don't have to do those kind of sessions.
Senator Sheldon.
Well, really what we passed in the legislature, that special session, was an extension of what we did for the aerospace industry in 1998. And people don't realize this, that the company doesn't get the incentives unless the planes are built and actually fly away. You know, it's not a check that the state writes to the company, and so it's dependent on them building the planes here, as Drew said. So I think it was very important to do this. I think we need to do, as you say as well, more for small business. We need a better culture for small business, especially in our state. I've always kind of wondered why the union calls themselves the Machinist Union, because really they're assemblers. They put things, they snap the tabs together, and you can build one and a half 737s today, each day in Renton. It's amazing how fast they put these planes together. But the real machinists, to me, are the companies that we have around the state that are manufacturing these parts. I've been here quite a while. When Certified Aerospace was out at the airport, we had 450 jobs out there. They ran 3 shifts a day. They didn't PUD3 supplied the power. There was 1 meter for like 9 buildings out there, and they didn't need any heat in the buildings because the machines provided all the heat they needed. 450 great jobs out there. So we need to get back to that culture that we appreciate the people that make the parts, and they're the machinists. The people that assemble them are great, but they should not hold the rest of the state hostage because they have a position of leverage there. It's interesting, too, that the first vote failed for this agreement, long-term agreement with Boeing. But the second vote passed, and the second vote would not have occurred if the International Union had not pressed for that vote. And I think the International Union was afraid if this contract was not approved, the work would go to a right-to-work state, and they would lose over $25 million in union dues. So there's a lot going on and a lot riding on this vote here the last couple of days, and now you'll see in the news that some people are calling for a revote. They're not happy. But I think what the actual workers told the local union leaders are, we want the straight story, we want to control our destiny, and we want long-term stability in the state. So it was, I think, a big deal for everybody in the state that the package did pass.
So the training of folks to be able to have a skilled labor force is one of the big reasons they do stay here, is not having that same kind of training and having that same well-trained workforce in other places is one of their big considerations. And again, our investment in those, especially community college level training, especially right up there by Everett, is part of the package. And I think it's a great idea, a great thing to support. It is something that we've been doing all along, but we're stepping up to this particular proposal. Our investment in education in this state is actually woefully low compared to many other states, but we do the best with the lowest amount of money that we have, and I think we need to continue in that trend. Supporting our community college system, and technology and engineering are the other two areas. Our kids need to be able to have real opportunities to get higher level degrees, and engineering is a very big one, as well as working in computers and technology. And so I keep working on those, but we have a system actually pretty well ready to go and get the people ready for the 777X. So I'm excited to do that work and continue to get kids ready at the high school and early childhood level.
Thank you. We have an opportunity for a couple more questions if anyone wants to pass them to Heidi. In the meantime, what does your crystal ball say about transportation this session? And are we going to see the Belfair bypass on a list of projects? And are we going to see reforms that come along with a tax, if you believe there's going to be a tax? And I'll start with Representative Haigh.
Well, I think we've already changed who is in charge of DOT, and that's, a big change. There were some big problems, I think, with the pontoons being a problem. We left it up to an industry, a business, a company to oversee. Another company in the state really wasn't as involved as it needs to be, and now for the pontoon construction, which is huge down on the harbor, huge workforce, the state is now doing the inspections, and I think that's the right thing to do. In fact, I know people that are actually doing it, and it's an amazing process, so they've done much better with the pontoons. The Belfair bypass, in the 10-cent package, it was right in the middle of it, 800 million, 800 million. 80 million?
76 million, I think.
80 million. Okay. I'm a little number dyslexic.
Well, you deal with this big education.
Well, just dialing the telephone, I get the numbers wrong. So if I don't call back, it's because I can't get the numbers right. But I think the Belfair bypass has got to be there, whatever the package is. The House had a 10.5 cent. And then the Senate came up with 11.5 cent gas tax. And I don't believe this district wants any gas tax at all. I mean, I hear from folks pretty significantly. But there's going to have to be some money provided in some way if we're actually going to build a Belfair bypass. And I support that. I also believe we have got to change some things along the Lynch Road interchange. There's got to be some way, if we build side roads. I would build side roads all the way from the casino on both sides of the highway. I think it would be cheaper so that people don't have to go out on the highway to get to town or go to the casino. That's what I would do. There's some other improvements that need to be there, but again, it costs money. And I think I've got to work pretty closely with the county to be able to get it done. I've worked on the Lynch Road interchange before and thought the county had some ideas, and nothing has quite happened there. So we have many other transportation issues, and safety is, to me, the biggest thing. And safety in Belfair is woefully hurting when nobody can get through town. So whatever package is put together, if I start hearing from people, yeah, we can afford that, and oh, by the way, the Belfair bypass has got to be there. I don't see me voting for something without it being there, whatever it is.
Senator Sheldon, from the Majority Coalition Caucus perspective.
Well, our caucus has put forth an idea to DOT that about 10 or 11 different reforms that need to be done if a transportation package is going to pass. And one of those is that we wouldn't charge sales tax on construction for those projects. We not me, because I'm not on as part of the negotiating team, have been meeting with the other caucuses for the last several months, and with the governor's office as well. But the negotiations have basically broken down, so we'll be considering the transportation package in this next session, and I think it'll be the nameplate issue of the session. Every session does have one big issue. But I don't think it's in the cards to pass a gas tax this year. like Kathy, and I'm sure Drew as well, we're hearing from people in the 35th district no to a gas tax. We live in a very rural area. We drive large vehicles generally, and we commute long distances. A quick story, a national group did a study of congestion on the west coast of the United States. Who has the most congestion? And it's based on how much time you spend in your car. And so you'd think that LA, San Francisco, Seattle would come out as the most congested in the country. No, it's Shelton, Washington. What's not? It's the most congested place in the West Coast. It's not because we have traffic, it's because we don't have jobs. We're in our cars and commute farther and longer than any other area. So my daughter works in Seattle. She sees people she went to high school with that come up to Seattle that run excavator for the Mercer Street project, and they leave here at 3:30 in the morning. They spend their day, half their day in the car. We are impacted by long distances, very much so, and by the lack of jobs in our community. So people live here because it's a great place to live, but they can't work here. They can't live where they work or work where they live. So people that live here are very much opposed to big increases in gas taxes. So I think the Belfair bypass, though, will be included if there is a statewide package. But unfortunately, we're kind of reverting to the old days where we're urban versus rural. And so I mentioned my daughter, where she works, the Amazon is building 3 buildings larger than the Columbia Tower. It's amazing how much is happening in the urban area right now. And for a transportation package to pass, I think our citizens are going to have to be convinced that their money is not just going to the urban area to pay for buses or for bicycle lanes. Now, the average person that rides a bus in Seattle today makes $72,000. Isn't that a difference than what our bus riders make here? It's a huge, huge difference. So transportation kind of brings out all those differences, and that's why I say that I think it'll be the big nameplate issue this year, but I don't think it'll pass this session, perhaps next year. This is an election year as well, and that's a big issue for a lot of people that are in the legislature.
You know, I would love to hear more about how small business does feel about the transportation issue, because, I mean, if we're going to grow our businesses here, how do you do that? I mean, how do you attract those businesses here?
Yeah.
And then, if, you know, are we going to be stuck even more trying to get through Belfair?
Well,
if we have the businesses here, I mean,
I think
you can't look at one side of it and not realize there's another side of it.
Belfair will be included in a statewide package. The bypass will be included. It was included in your package. I think it'll be included in anybody's package. The question is getting people to vote for it that feel that they get value for what they're paying. I mean, are the pontoons floating or sinking? Is the tunnel boring machine boring or sitting there for a month? And people are upset about that, and they want value if they're going to pay the highest gas tax in the country.
I just, a couple of things to add to that. I mean, Senator Sheldon, I think, did a very good job of summarizing this whole thing. But I think our priorities in the DOT are way out of whack, and they have been for some time. You look at close to half of our transportation dollars in the state are spent on sound transit that moves less than 3% of the population. That just doesn't make sense. We spend $1 billion to build a tunnel from Westlake to the U District. That's 10 Belfair bypasses. You know, do I support the Belfair bypass? Absolutely. Do I support this gas tax? No. Because we don't have the reforms in this bill that are needed to really fundamentally reform DOT. And until we do that, I can't support asking for more money. And Senator Sheldon's comments about the rural economy, this will be yet another nail in the coffin to the rural economy. When you look at half of the people in Mason County commute outside of this county every day for work. And I haven't heard from anybody in the emails or phone calls that I've gotten that say, oh, please vote for this. You know, tax us more. And the other thing is, it's not just the gas tax, there's the truckload fees. There's a major trucking company in Spokane that when the House passed in the last regular session, a transportation bill that had a gas tax increase. It died in the Senate, and thankfully. But there was a trucking company in Spokane that moved to Idaho shortly after that House vote. There went jobs. because they weren't gonna pay those fees. So by relocating to Idaho, I mean, it was right across the border. And those big pictures we've gotta keep in mind. So, you know, do we need the Belfair bypass? Absolutely we do. And it should have been done 20 years ago. It's a great Chinese proverb, the best time to plant a tree is today, better time was 20 years ago. You know, and so I support prioritizing things like the Belfair bypass. Highway 2 is a death trap up in Snohomish County. And that also would have a significant improvement on our transportation, freight mobility. Those are all things that we definitely need to do, but not by adding another 12 cents. We need to look at fundamental reforms in DOT. And the other thing I just want to add is the Panama Canal is going to have an impact on us. That widening completes next year. And right now the West Coast, the widening of the Panama Canal is significant because ships coming from the Far East, they're too big, they can't fit through the Panama Canal, so they come to the West Coast. Those goods are offloaded and sent to the east, either via truck or rail. So what is Seattle doing to help? So anyway, let me hold on. When that Panama Canal widening completes, those ships can bypass the West Coast now and go directly to the east. And so what traffic will be left to the West Coast is going to be very competitive to get. And so what have we done in Seattle? We knocked down the viaduct, reduced it by a lane by building a tunnel that's north and south. Meanwhile, Vancouver, British Columbia for the last 10 years has invested in infrastructure going east and west to capture that shipping traffic. So ships will go to Vancouver instead of Seattle, Tacoma. They'll go to Long Beach. These are high-paying jobs in the ports that we're at threat of losing because we haven't focused on what the priorities are in freight mobility and congestion relief.
Thank you. It's 8:20, and I want you each to have a chance to wrap up. I know Representative Haigh has to be at another meeting, so I'll let you wrap up if you have any closing comments. Thank you so much for coming, and then Senator Sheldon and Representative MacEwen.
Well, I just thank you for having this meeting. I really appreciate the ongoing information from the chamber as things develop, because it may be a short session and everybody says we'll be done in 60 days and there'll be about 10 bills that pass, but that's just not going to be the case. There will be some very big issues. I think the transportation package, if it comes up again, I really need to hear from business, and I want people to really think about the priority of whether we pay some taxes to improve our roadways. And if these guys really want to improve the transportation infrastructure and the leadership in it, then I think we better start really sitting down and talking about what that would really look like. I've really worked on construction, making it more efficient, more effective on a committee I put together years ago called the Capital Projects Advisory and Review Board, allowing transportation and other projects to be done by design build rather than design bid build, as well as capital, where it's called GCCM, and we save millions of dollars when government can work a little bit more like private industry, but we have to change the laws to allow government to do that. And I have worked really hard on that issue for a very long time and will continue to work on it. So business is different than government. And if we're going to be more efficient, then we have to be very specific about what that is, as well as making it fair for all the businesses that want to work and do jobs for the state, as well as the issue of paying sales tax. If you get out of a sales tax, or a sales tax goes to transportation, then the federal government doesn't want to have to pay sales tax, and the schools don't want to have to pay sales tax. Sounds like a great issue, but we have got to really look at all the repercussions of such a decision. And I would love to have those conversations. So let's get together and talk about it. If there's real changes we can make, if it can come from this place, then great. But I'm tired of talking about it, just like the Belfair bypass. I'm tired of talking about it, and then everybody just throws up the red flag. Well, you can't do it for this reason or that reason. I would like to focus on one thing and get it done. That would be good government, and I want to do that. Just saying. Thank you.
And we will have a delegation of chamber members that come over right after cutoff, like we did last session, so we can talk about some of
Great.
those
I think the
reforms.
transportation issue is especially one we're going to have to work pretty hard on.
Yeah.
If we're going to do anything, it's got to be right for this district. So, yeah.
Well, thank you for your comments. It is a very important issue, and as I say, it'll probably be the nameplate issue of this session. But, you know, I serve on the Joint Transportation Committee, and I've been on the Transportation Committee since 1991. The last meeting I was at in Tacoma with the Joint Transportation Committee, the DOT was talking about some of the audit issues that come up. And we have asked our state auditor to do some performance audits on DOT. So there's a lot of issues, and you just can't ignore those. For example, the tolling issues that the DOT has done a very poor job of putting together what the tolling should be for some of the highways and new bridges. I asked the DOT, why do they compare themselves to other transportation departments in other states? They kept saying, well, Utah, we're doing well, and then we're much better than Oregon, and we're just about on a par with different states. I said, why don't you compare yourself to the utility industry, for example? Utility industry has performance measures. They do the cost of power. They compare themselves for all the issues that you would think that a business would compare themselves with other comparable businesses. And DOT wants not to do that because it's easier to just say, well, we're just right at the midpoint of performance. Well, that's not what the citizens want. They want to see value, more value for the dollars that they spend in transportation. And when you have projects that are so ungodly expensive, and up to 25 or 30% of the project is all on permitting and environmental issues, it's crazy, because you know the road is going to go there. It's not going to go someplace else. So it's frustrating that we have a system that basically costs too much money, I think. It's expensive to build roads in our country. It's less expensive in Texas, sure, because it's flat. But we still have had a lot of examples of projects that have gone way over budget. If we compare ourselves just to other states, the cost of road building in Washington is higher than any other state in the country. It shouldn't be that way, but we have a very high-cost state to do business in. So
I'm going to follow up real quick because I think this is really important going into this session. We just heard Representative Haigh make a very impassioned speech for at least partial reforms. What have been the roadblocks to real reforms in the last few years?
Labor issues.
Thanks.
Have been one big one. Kathy's not here to defend herself, but I think what she's saying is just give me more money, we'll take care of it. And what I'm saying is that we have to look how we spend the money and be more efficient with how we spend the dollars in order to get value to buy the taxpayers in, because they're not buying what's going on right now. I mean, we get a tremendous amount of emails, don't raise my gas tax. If they saw value, they would be more willing to help pay for it. So some of the labor, the environmental reforms, the permitting issues are unbelievable in our state. And I think we have to address some of those issues head on. And unfortunately, you know, it's been a difficult time with the governor right now to get him to understand that. But as time goes on, I think everybody learns the job, hopefully. So we'll see.
Thank you. Representative MacEwen.
So just in closing, I'll diverge from transportation, but and just say, you know, as a small business owner, you know, I weigh every vote with that thought in mind. I've got to live with the consequences of what we do in Olympia, and that's a big thing for me. And we look at some simple things that we could do, and Tim spoke to this earlier, some of the redundancies that we could eliminate in state government. I mean, those of you that have started a business or taken over a business, you know, I mean, the redundant information you give to the state, to the Employment Security Department, to LNI, the Department of Revenue. I mean, this is a very simple thing. I mean, it should be a one-click thing, fill it out, bang, done, and it goes off. But you go through all these levels, and there's case managers to each one. There's a lot of little things like that I think would, one, streamline things for businesses, reduce some costs. It's not going to save the state overnight, but it would reduce some costs in there. And I think we need to start looking at those things and quit. You know, there's a mentality, and I understand it to a degree, but we've got to get past this, and that is, you know, it's this defending one's turf in state government because it's been there for however many years, and we got to get away from that and look at what the purpose is. State government is there to serve the people, not the other way around. And You know, there's been a constant push to increase, again, the B&O taxes. 271% is what the House wanted to do to you last year. 271%. And it's ironic to me, you know, and I voted no. I made an impassioned plea. I knew I was going to lose in this vote, but thank God it died in the Senate. But it's ironic to me. Then we go into this special session for Boeing, and I swear the speech that I and some others gave against the B&O tax was suddenly used to defend the aerospace industry by some colleagues on the other side of the aisle. And I'm like, are you kidding? Don't you get it? And we've got to get through, and you've got to speak up. I mean, none of us have businesses to hire, you know, the lobbyists that some of the larger corporations have. And so we've got to be a voice, and that's my plea back to you, is be a voice. And let legislators know what the impact is to your business when these things come up. And that's the only way we're going to defeat them. So it is a pleasure to serve you. I appreciate the opportunity, and it's always an open door, and look forward to continuing to serve you.
You know, one issue we didn't talk about, which is a big one this year, is $15 minimum wage. Okay? Now, the minimum wage in this state is not, it just went to $9.33 an hour. That's the highest minimum wage in the country. And there's some people, generally in SeaTac and then in Seattle, that want a $15 minimum wage. Really what we need is a training wage. A wage lower than the minimum wage, so employers will hire some young people to get some experience. But that's just an issue of how different it is in the populated areas of Seattle and King County, Snohomish and Pierce County, and where we live. There's just a huge, huge difference. You know, Governor Inslee, we talked about transportation. He told me that, don't worry about it, Sheldon. All I need is 62% of the vote in King County, and it's done. There's so many people that live in that urban area that it's disproportionate to what live in the rural areas of our state. So we have to have something that fits for urban and rural, or we're just getting dragged along. We can't be dragged along with a $15 minimum wage or some of the other things that Seattle and King County can live with. Their revenues are increasing so fast. Terry's here, Jeffries. Our revenues for our sales tax are basically flat in the county. But King County's revenues will increase by 50% in the next 8 years. That's their projections. It's amazing how different it is. But
So if I just add one item into that with the training wage, the aerospace industry and suppliers, one of the resounding things that I heard, some of this overlaps some federal issues as well, but the inability to hire miners and to train them. I mean, the majority of people that build airplanes in this state are not college graduates. They're high school graduates, two-year technical schools, and I think that's awesome. I don't think everybody has to go to a four-year school, frankly. And these are high-paying wage jobs. With these suppliers, what their frustration is they can't hire miners to do the work, and then you end up having to pay money to train them post high school. And I think we really need to look at expanding an apprenticeship program. There's federal issues with OSHA in there, but I think we can expand that industry, and kids coming out of new market skill centers that are in high school and everything, to be able to go right into that industry and be starting out at $35,000 a year. I think that's fantastic.
More than I made right out of college. In Washington. Thank you both for coming.
well, thank you.
Thanks.